This is Harold S. Reed Jr., and welcome to another episode of the Ice Talks, where we implement change every day. Hey, Harold S. Reed Jr. here, and welcome to another episode of the Ice Talks. If it sounds like there's an echo, I'm actually creating this podcast sitting in my dojo waiting for my training to start this morning. So I have a lot of space. So the acoustics might sound a little funny on the recording. But today I want to talk to you about something that I don't really talk about in my coaching practice and in my speaking practices. I'm not really big on giving relationship advice. I'm not big on giving relationship advice because I tend to think that those who do give relationship advice give the air or appearance that they themselves have it all together and they know what's best. Listen, I can tell you about chasing your dreams. I can tell you about believing in yourself. I can tell you about not taking any shorts, not taking yourself for granted, putting in the work. And I can tell you about all of those things, but my conscience really, really has to pull me back. My integrity really, really has to pull me back from giving relationship advice. And there are a few reasons. One, I'm a mess at times. This is the one area where if anybody were to ask me, in what area of your life do you just constantly, trip over your own feet? I'd have to say it's my marriage, only because this is where I'm the most vulnerable. So this is naturally where I'm the most flawed. And it is what it is. So I can't really see myself giving people, this is the direction you should go advice. However, there are some things that I have learned from my faults. There are things that I have learned from my mistakes. And those are things that I want to share with you in this talk. I want to talk to you about communication. I want to talk to you about acceptance. And I want to talk to you about accountability. All right. Now, in communication, the definition of communication, paraphrasing, is the conveying of information or stimuli between one party to another. There's a sender and there's a receiver. Okay, so one person has to be giving information or stimuli, the other person has to be receiving it. An area in which relationships fail in communication is either the person is not sending it right, or the other person is not receiving it right, or the other person may not be receiving it at all because that other person is not in tune with being open to receive the message to begin with. All right. If you are in a relationship with someone, and this is a serious relationship, I'm not talking about the casual dating. I'm talking about someone, and not necessarily marriage, but someone you are significantly investing your time with, or with whom you're significantly investing your time. I always got to be my own grammar police. But if this is someone with whom you're investing significant time, then it only makes sense that you listen as much. No, as a matter of fact, you listen twice as much as you speak, to go along with the old saying, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. But the reality is we get caught up in ourselves so much that we want to be right all the time. We want to believe that we're right. We want to believe that we can't do no wrong. We want to believe that it's not our fault when things don't go right. How many times have you been in a situation where you've got something to bear? You have to own something, but when you tell the story, you conveniently leave that out. Your boss yelled at you on your job, and your boss was really, really disrespectful in the manner in which he or she yelled at you. So you snap back at your boss, and now you on an unpaid vacation for a week, or you got a write up in your personnel file or what have you. And when you tell people this story, you tell them how you came to work and the boss just started jumping on your back and you was like, I ain't taking that. Who you think you talking to, and so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. And your friend who you telling, the person to whom you're telling this story, they have your back. They support you. Yeah, I wouldn't take that either. You know, I would have punched him in his face, you know, all that kind of silliness, right? But what you conveniently left out of that telling of the story was that you were late for work by an hour and a half with no excuse, and you didn't call in. See, so we all have something to bear. We all have some piece of ownership in a situation if it doesn't go the way we want it to go. And this is very much prevalent in relationships. This is something that I've learned. This is like, again, this is why I learned I'm the most flawed in my life, because it's where I'm most vulnerable. So naturally, I want to protect myself. We all want to protect ourselves. But at the same time, in protecting ourselves, we can't hurt the people that we're with. And this is something that we do. And more often than not, I want to believe it's not intentional. It's just human self-preservation, even at the emotional level. But again, I want to talk to you, we're talking about communication. So when I say that I want to talk to you about communication, acceptance, and accountability, first of all, if you have an issue, you have to communicate that issue with the person. You have to. You can't have a problem with somebody and not tell them what the problem is, but expect them to correct the problem, because they don't know that a problem exists. You cannot correct what you don't know needs correction. All right? I I met someone years ago. I won't get too deep into it. He misspelled a word in a report, and I corrected him. And he actually challenged, and this is a very simple word, but the dude spelled the word wrong. And he actually challenged me on the correction. And I had to look at him like, are you serious? So that's where acceptance comes from. Well, let me, before I jump too deep into acceptance, let me spend some more time on communication. I think I brushed over that a little too quickly. You have to share what's going on inside you. You have to let that person know what's going on inside you. All right. If there's a way that they're talking to you that's unacceptable, if you know what, if there's a way that they make love that could be better or is unacceptable, or is there a way that they behave or what have you, you have to let them know. If just as much as you want to tell somebody you love them, you have to let them know when they're not living up to the potential that you would want out of someone with whom you're in that relationship. All right. So you have to be able to communicate that. Now, on the other side of that is the acceptance. You have to be open. You have to have, if you've opened your frequency to allow this person into your life, and you two are supposed to be endeavoring to ride the same wavelength together, then you have to maintain said open frequency to receive the information, the communication that the other person is giving you. And listen, this is where I had to fall back myself. Years ago, early in my relationship, well, I'll say early in my marriage, because my past relationships were just, they were fun, and they ended before they got too serious. But my marriage is the most significant relationship I've ever had with a woman in my life. It's almost 20 years. All right, I actually have a longer relationship with my wife than I do my own mother. So. This is where I'm the most vulnerable. So this is where I'm the most flawed. And one of the things I had to come to terms with, being I guess the alpha type personality that I am, I had to learn when and how to receive information. I had to learn how to just shut up and accept what I'm being told. Especially when it's about me, and then, before I get into accountability, let me spend some time on acceptance. Like I said before, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. So we have to be able and willing to accept the information that the other person is giving us. We may not like it, but if you love that person, okay, if you love that person and that person loves you, all right, going back to communication, when you convey this information, you have to do so in a manner that's conducive with finding a resolution. Otherwise, you're just venting. And if you're venting, fine, but at some point in time, you may have to come back and apologize for the manner in which you expressed yourself. All right. And if you're, open to receive that, you may have to understand, and accepting that, you may have to understand that this person is just venting. So, you have to take what we in law enforcement call the totality of the circumstances and see it for what it is. If your significant other just incurred a loss and now, they're quiet and they're despondent and, you go to them and they snap at you, as opposed to getting offended that they snapped at you, understand they might be going through something. All right. Years back, when my grandmother passed away, I had guests in my home that had come up to my room. I was, still young, living with my father and my grandfather. Both my grandparents still. My grandmother passed away, but I had guests in my room on the third floor, and my older cousin came upstairs, and he had some things on his mind, in his heart, that he wanted to get off his mind and off his chest. But I had company. I had people in my room. It wasn't a situation that was conducive for me to accept. But I didn't just send him off. I said, listen, let's talk about this later. But he just wasn't hearing it. He wanted to get off his chest what he wanted to get off his chest at that time. And it almost got ugly. All right. But my point is, I was willing to accept what he had to say, just not at that time. And he was unwilling to temper the manner in which he wanted to convey his information. Okay, so you have to be mindful of how you communicate your information. You have to be willing to communicate your information. Then you also have to be mindful as to how you convey your information, because they always say it's better to get, what did they say? You'll get more bees, or you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. Listen, first of all, I'm not in the business of attracting bugs, so I really never liked that saying, you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. No. But I will say I understand the concept of the quote, in that you want to sweeten your approach to some extent, and so that it's received well, so that your message is received well. So what it is that you're conveying is received well. You can't start off, listen, I want to talk to you, but you dirty, low down, blah, 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 blah. Nobody's going to be willing to sit there and go through all of that just to hear you say you hurt my feelings. All right. So in any case, sorry, I get off track from time to time, but you have to be willing to accept, to convey that information in a positive manner. You have to be willing to accept that information in a positive manner. All right. Then finally, you have to be willing to take accountability for what has been conveyed to you. All right. If your significant other says, I don't like it when blah, blah, blah. And I hate saying blah, 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 but so on and so forth. All right. If your significant other says, I don't like it when, it bothers me when, they're telling you something is bothering them. Something is offsetting their frequency with you. Right. And what tends to happen, and again, most vulnerable, most flawed, what tends to happen is when we hear, it bothers me when you insert offense here, we don't hear the it bothers me when part. We hear the offense part. And because we hear the offense part, and that is being presented to us, the first thing human self-preservation does is put up the wall. We get defensive. See? We get defensive. And then instead of taking in what's been told, instead of listening and accepting what's been told and taking accountability for what's been told, we put up the wall, we put up the defenses, we start strategizing, we start going into the mental Rolodex and start pulling out files of, well, what about when you, so on and so forth. And then there was the time that this, that, and the third, and you ain't perfect either, and you got faults, and you. No, that's not good. And again, something I had to learn myself. You know, sometimes you just got to fall back and take it. Sometimes you got to fall back and take it. Sometimes, you know, I had a situation on a job a few years back, well, many years back, where my attitude needed some adjusting. I have to honestly say and I made said adjustments, but someone said something to me along the lines of, if one person has a problem with you, that's, you know, it is what it is. It's a personality conflict. Two people, okay. Maybe one person was influenced by the other and they came with a preconceived notion. All right. But if you got 4 or 5 people who are around you and they all have the same negative viewing of you, then it's not them. It's you. Something about you has to change. All right. So understand that none of us are perfect by any means. None of us are perfect. All right. But we have to be, again, open to receive the information, open to give the information, open to accept the information. And then we have to take accountability for the information we've received. All right. And you want to defend yourself. That's a natural human response. I'm not taking that away from anybody, but I am encouraging you to develop the strength and this is what I'm going to call the strength of humility. Develop the strength of humility to put your feelings aside, to put your defenses down, and understand that the person is coming to you telling you something that is bothering them. And if you care about that person, you should care about the fact that they came to you with a problem because they want to resolve that problem, because they want to continue to stay with you. Because quite frankly, if the problem was just utterly unacceptable, they could just bounce. They could just be like, I'm out. Why? What happened? What'd I do? Don't you worry about it. I just, and they don't have to give you a reason. They could, terminate it without cause. You could just leave. The person could just leave. So if somebody actually comes to you with the problem, don't be so quick to defend yourself. Now, if they come to you with something that's totally off the wall, that's totally just out of pocket, and you can defend yourself, at least be open to hear them out all the way through before jumping in. See, I've experienced, it's been my experience that when you're talking with people, they're not listening to what you're saying, and you're not listening to what they're saying. You are listening just enough to find a point where you can interject, defend, and deflect. Again, you are listening just enough to find a point where you can interject, defend, and deflect. All right? And that's rarely, if ever, good for the relationship or even that discussion by itself. All right? So understand that in a significant relationship, communication is important, and I'm going to stress this again. You have to be willing to give the information, express yourself in a positive manner, in a manner that is conducive with the person receiving the information well. All right. Then being the receiver of the information, you have to be open to receive the information, and you have to be willing to accept the information as it's given, understanding that this is how this person is feeling. And let me say this, we really have to pay attention, not to what we hear in our head, but what the person is actually saying. I can't tell you How many times in my life I've expressed myself to someone, not just even in a relationship, in just different matters of business and dealings and what have you, where I've expressed myself one way, which I like to think I speak as bluntly and plain as possible, sometimes too much so, right? But instead of taking what I've said, I try to speak at, I hate saying try, I endeavor to speak and communicate at a face value level. All right, I don't like to play mind games for the most part, unless I'm in a position where I have to strategize or what have you. But I like to speak most of the time at a point where in which you see it and you can take it for what it is. You can take it at face value, right? So when something comes along that listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to how you interpret what I'm saying. Don't filter what I'm saying. So when someone is talking to you and they're conveying their feelings and what they're upset about to you or what have you, do not apply your own personal filter. Well, so what you're saying is, no, what they're saying is what they said. Don't flip it to a way that, because what you do is you take out pieces and elements of what they're saying so that it's more palatable for you to receive. No, sometimes you have to take what's being said in the manner in which it's being said, as long as it's positive, because again, no one wants to be disrespected. But again, okay, you have to take what's being said and accept it. And then if necessary, take accountability for what you've been told. Take accountability for yourself. If your partner hates it when you fart and don't say, excuse me, then change that. If your partner doesn't like it when, your friends come over and you make absolutely no attempt to straighten up the crib in any way, shape or form, come on, check yourself. If your partner doesn't like it when you leave the toothpaste uncapped, leave the cap off the toothpaste. Check yourself. Listen, everybody wants to tell somebody to check themselves, but nobody wants to check themselves, and that has to change. That's something we all must do. So for the last time, be open to conveying information, conveying your feelings in a positive manner where in which the person is open to receive it. You have to be in the receiving end, open to receiving this information from the other person or people, all right? And then you have to be willing to accept accountability for your role or your part in what has been conveyed to you. There are times you may be totally innocent. The person may be wrong. The person may have misunderstood. The person may have misread the situation, read the situation wrong. And so at that point, you can correct. But make sure your correction is true. Make sure because they may be coming in from a direction where they think they're correcting you, but because they're mistaken, you have to correct them. So again, the tables turn. The tables turn and the plates shift, right? So if we can do this, if we can learn to do this, if we can all learn to do this, if we can all learn to be better communicators, if we can all learn to receive better than we project, I think relationships will become a whole lot better. If we strengthen our sense of humility, because there's a difference between being humiliated and being humble. There's a difference between humility and humiliation. But people tend to think that showing humility is being humiliated. That's not true, all right? And if you're dealing with someone that you love and someone that you care about, you have to be willing to humble yourself for the greater good of your relationship, because your relationship is not you. Your relationship comes out of what the both of you put into it. And if it means something to you, if it's important enough to you, you have to put your feelings aside. You have to put your defenses down. And oh my God, knowing the type of young man that I was, the man that I've become, the man that I am, and the man that I want to become. Some of the stuff I can't believe I'm saying myself, but these are things that I have learned. So with that said, I hope you've gotten something out of this. I'll be posting some more podcasts in the next day or so, keeping up. Also, make sure you follow me. Share and follow me. Share these podcasts. Let your friends know what's going on, because we got some big things coming up. Before I sign off, let me tell you what I got going on. I'm about to drop the next book. The next book is called Get Your Mind Right, 10 Lessons Towards Success. All right? This book here, this book right here, is going to be a killer. It's going to be a killer. You're going to get something out of it. All right? So I'm looking to hit some cities over the course of the next year, starting this summer and going into next spring. I don't know if I'm going to be traveling during the winter, depending on what the winter looks like. But I definitely want to, hit some cities and really get this book out. All right. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at The Ice Talks. All right. You can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/ just search HRJR Enterprises or search me by name, Harold S. Reed Jr. All right. You can follow me on Instagram at HS Reed Jr. All right. And again, also, of course, you can find this on Spreaker. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, I believe. All right. Got some moves to make because, iHeartRadio hasn't come up yet. But that's the next move, to get this podcast on iHeartRadio. So I got plenty of ways for people to, get this podcast. So I want you, my listeners, my audience, my following, and I respect you, I love you, and I appreciate you. I want you to share these podcasts. I want you to share how we are implementing change every day. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Ice Talks, where we implement change every day.